My name is Michael, which is very unique. I'm named after my father and my mother, and I have a family name. So my full name is Michael Marie Ann Thomas. Was not supposed to be here. My mom had complications. So when I was born, both sides of my family were in town. And my mom's youngest sister actually put the whole name together because my dad said, well, she can't have your name without my name. So they put together Michael Marie Ann. So yeah, mom's name, dad's name, family name. In Greenville, Texas, of all places, which is east of Dallas. It's the same town my dad was born in. And my grandmother and my grandfather, they were married there, but they were not originally from there. I am the youngest of three for three girls, and my dad has two sons. But I'm kind of spoiled, but kind of not. My parents divorced when I was very young, and I was on a very unique divorce system, 6 months and 6 months at one, and two different, different environments. One was very privileged, and being the product of oil and natural gas, and the other was on a police officer salary and a nurse's aide salary. So a big house with my own room, 6 months of the year, and then sharing a bedroom with one of my sisters for the other part of the year.
And how did those different visions of class impact your upbringing?
Well, it showed me that I'm not a materialistic person, because it was such a huge difference being coming home from school and my mom would be there versus coming home to an empty house, because two parents had to work in order to live a certain lifestyle. And there was, I wouldn't say a lack of love, it was just their love was showing me through material goods when I was in Houston, versus being in North Texas. It was, we don't have the things to show you materially, but my mom knew what was going on in my school. She knew what was going on in my life. So if I had a bad day or if I was being bullied, she knew beforehand. I couldn't say I don't want to talk about it. She was like, no, you're in my house, what's going on? And she would address the issue before it became a problem. So that was huge, where going home and it's an empty house, I have a lot of time to be able to hide those emotions. And so when my dad comes in, how was your day? It was great. And it could have been the worst day ever. I'm like, it was great, because I knew he had other stresses in the world.
Sure. What were the different experiences being who you are in those two towns?
Houston was more diverse at that time as far as the neighborhood I lived in. I went to a Jewish elementary school, basically. So it was half the students and teachers were Jewish. So we learned about Hanukkah as well as Christmas and other Jewish holidays. So I just thought that was a normal existence. But when I moved to North Texas, and I was like, what are we doing for Hanukkah? They're like, we're Christian. I was like, okay. And also it was not a lot of diversity. There were some times where I was like the only kid of color in a grade, not like a class, but the entire grade. And I had to sort of figure out who I was, absent of my skin color, which is very unique because it's always there. But I didn't want that to be like a stamp for me, because there was no one else that was there. But I remember like every Black History Month, it's like all eyes were on me. And I'm like, I don't have those tools to tell you everything because I'm just in 5th grade, and it's beyond that for my scope. But at the same time, I was very much aware of being alone in those situations. So my development as far as my relationships with other Black kids, when I would come across them, it was almost like it was foreign. Like I would want to know about all these different things. And they were like, you can't sit with us. So it was like being denied in two different spaces. So I really had to develop a sense of self personally outside of my race. So later on, now that I'm in college again, I made it a point to go to a HBCU because I needed something to tie my race with my identity in a positive way. And it's like it triggered something in me, something that made me feel confident enough to not only cut my hair, but wear it out in its growing process, to appreciate the colors of my skin and my lips, and not feel like I was on display, but this is just me natural. in every sense of the word. And if you don't like it, it's okay, because I'm okay with it. And I was always very aware that when I cut my hair the first time, I immediately put on a wig or had weaves or braids, and because I was in a professional environment, and I felt that being in that environment, I couldn't look like this. But now, the confidence that I gained at HBCU, I am fully aware that this is me, and I can do that.
Sure. What did it mean to be, I mean, to me, tell me a story or an experience that you had in your childhood, either as an isolated member of the society in Greenville or, well, let's start with that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we moved away from Greenville early.
Okay.
So I would only go visit my grandmother there.
Okay.
But living in North Texas, we moved a lot because my stepdad, his job, every time he had our promotion, we had to move. And the first time that I was very isolated, I was living in a very small town called Weatherford, Texas. It is west of Fort Worth. And I remember being in an honors class, and it was just me alone. And anytime I would say something that they thought was, I guess, thought-provoking, they'd be like, that's a great question. Like, wow, you can think, you know? Or if I was in another class that wasn't accelerated, I was like, I'm finished with my work, because they were reluctant to put me in those classes. So I remember applying for an honors program, and they were like, you're half of a point from being able to be accepted. And I remember going to my mom, and I was like devastated. And she was like, what's the matter? I was like, my teacher said that I'm a half a point from being able to go to the GT class, the gifted and talented class. And she's like, are you kidding me? And I was like, no. And I was like, so she said they calculated multiple times, and I could not be in that class. So I had to spend the rest of a semester in a classroom where I was completely done with everything within the first 5 minutes of it. And it was right. And I'm like, I'm wasting your time and my time by not allowing me that opportunity. And so I always felt like I had to prove how smart I was. So I had to read more. I had to practice more to make sure, because anytime I would take a standardized test, they would always say, oh, you're a point off. So you can't go here, or you're this and you can't go there. So I had to make sure that anytime I had to stand up in front of a class, anytime I had to make a speech or anything, it had to be the absolute best. So it developed this perfectionist mindset. And eventually, going through school, it actually wore me out. So when I graduated from high school and I started my college career the first time, I ended up having a pinched nerve in my brain, and I had to withdraw from school. And there's certain memories now, and it was just pretty much exhaustion and stress that caused my body just to tense up so much, because I was on this verge. I was like, by this age, I have to do this. By this age, I have to do that. I have to accomplish this. And it was such a need for perfection that it took a toll on my body. And even when I started healing, I was like, I got to get back in. And when I got back into school, I wasn't successful. And I felt like I had failed. And that burden was on me. I felt like I failed. So I went into the workforce. And when I went into the workforce, every job I did, I was on time, my things were accurate. And again, that perfectionist idea just kept mounting in me. And again, I had worn myself out to exhaustion. But this time, I broke away. I went overseas for the first time. I lived in Germany for 3 months. And I just kind of reconnected spiritually and mentally. And I said, if I'm going to go back to school, if I'm going to do something with my life, I have to do something that's going to make me happy. And that's when I made the decision to go to school. But this time, I went to an environment that I felt like I could feel included in. So I chose my HBCU, and I studied history because it's what I wanted to study. And now I am enjoying the experience and understanding that there's no real thing as perfection. We can strive to do our best, but I don't have to always have the highest A in the class. There's sometimes I can take a B or even a C, but I can still be great. I'm not defined by that anymore because I've made peace with my outside.
Before we were talking about, before we started recording, about an instance when you were on a school trip and sort of the blind spots of maybe some of the people around you, maybe some of the faculty members or the teachers that you had around you. could you maybe revisit that experience first, explain
Yes.
what was happening?
So I was in 10th grade, I believe. I was in 10th grade, 10th or 11th grade. And I was taking American AP history at Rockwall High School. And at the time, and it's kind of changed a little bit, but at the time it was a very kind of affluent area. And I just happened to live in the school district. I wasn't living in a huge house, again, apartment living at the time. And we were studying the Civil War. And first thing first was we had to read Uncle Tom's Cabin for reading because it was AP English and History together. And I remember telling my teacher, I said, I cannot read this book. And she goes, why? I said, well, I don't understand it. And she said, what do you mean? I said, the slave jargon, or how they were supposed to speak. I said, it's gibberish. It's like, I know people did not speak like this. It's not a coherent sentence. I said, I've tried to read it in my head. I've tried to read it out loud. It does not make sense to me. So it's taking away from the story. And I said, so I don't want to read it. And she's like, well, you have to for your grade. I said, well, I'm going to read Cliff Notes. And I'm telling you that right now because this book does not make sense to me. And I remember she asked me to one day in class while we were having a group discussion. I'm the only black kid in the class. I had one Indian girl that was in there, but it was basically me that was the brown one that was in the group. And she said, what does it mean when black people call others Uncle Tom? I was like, and all the eyes was like, like right there. And I remember looking at her for a moment and I was like, how am I gonna be respectful? Because my parents always taught me respect, no matter what. I said, well, you've read the book. I said, ample opportunities to get out of his situation. But yet he is so torn up about this one little girl that he skips out on his opportunity, skips out on his family, and ends up dying in bondage for this little blonde, blue-eyed girl. I said, so yes, if someone is catering to the needs of other whites in a way that is not beneficial for the other blacks that are around them, that's an Uncle Tom. And she's like, I just never understood that. Like, just wow. And then any other question that would happen, it would be there. But that same year, we took a trip to Natchez, Mississippi, Vicksburg and Natchez, Mississippi. Which, now that I think about it, I'm like, why would you do that? But she wanted to go to Natchez because during the time just before the Civil War, it had the highest concentration of millionaires in the country. So you see these beautiful, big plantation homes, mansions. And we stopped at Vicksburg first. And two of the parents that were chaperones were actually Civil War reenactors. One for the North and one for the South. And we went to Vicksburg and we went to all these little sites, but the one that we went to the most was the Confederate Cemetery. And I remember, number one, it was really eerie because it was strangely quiet on the cemetery. And they had this huge reenactment of a boat. They had put together one of the Confederate ships. And there was a path where you would drive and you would see the monuments of the Confederate states that were there. And we even took a picture in front of the one of Texas. And I remember walking through the cemetery. And that was the first time that something kind of clicked in me. And I remember thinking to myself, you lost, and I'm walking over your grave. Like, I was like, I'm walking over your grave, where I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be in an AP class in the first place. I shouldn't be on this trip, but I'm walking over your grave now, so you didn't win. Like, we won. And it was a little bit of joy and satisfaction there. And then we went to Natchez, where the homes were. And I remember we walked to the one that belonged to the Daughters of the Southern Confederate Soldiers. And this particular house was known for having this freestanding spiral staircase that was made out of this one piece of mahogany wood. The stairrail was this huge tree that they cut down and molded. And so it was really famous. And as soon as I walked through the door, you should have seen those women's faces. I was like, I felt like this energy in there, like, get out. And we're standing on the second floor and we're looking out and this huge plantation. Like, that's what was there. It's now a public park. But I'm looking at it and they're like, as far as you can see through those back trees, that was a plantation. And it was the first time that I really felt a sadness when I saw it, because I had been in Louisiana before. I had been on a river tour where we saw in the distance plantation homes and the remnants of slave shacks, but this was different. I was on soil that had been polluted by cruelty, and I felt it. But I had an incident when I was at a Hotel Cotley. Some students, and I never told my parents this, I never told anybody this story, but they were like, "Oh, we have a gift for you." And I was like, "Well, are you gonna give it to me?" You know, they were like, "Well, we don't know if we're gonna give it to you yet." But then when we were in our hotel rooms, they were like, "This is for you." And it was like this jar of hair grease, and it had this caricature on the front that had these huge lips and a bone between its nose. And I was like, why? Why would you do that? Like, I just thought, you bastards, you know, like, really I did. And I was like, it was like this moment of just a reality that it didn't matter how smart I was, or people that I spent time with class in, that I've been over to their houses, that I had to do projects with. They didn't see me as an equal student. They didn't see me as Michael. They saw me as what they thought that character was on that jar of hair grease. And what was really hurtful to me, there was one girl that was in the group, and she was actually darker skinned. One of her parents was from South America. And I was like, you of all people, you're a minority too. You use the same shampoo that I use. I'm looking at it right here. And you wanted to participate in that. And I did not want to tell my parents because I felt like I didn't stand up enough. And my parents are so strong because they are children of the civil rights movement. They had to deal with segregation. My father had to see his father be called boy by high school students. I didn't stand up for them. I didn't stand up for what my grandparents fought for because I didn't stand up for myself then. And I was like, they would have been so disappointed because they raised me differently than that. That's what I felt. And it took me a long time. Like I said, I have never told anybody that, not even my sisters, because they would have been angry for me. But I just, at that time, it was like, no matter what I do, no matter what I say, I cannot be without my race. I can't be without my skin color. I will always be identified as that, no matter. You can even see it now. We had a black president, but what do we say? A black president. We don't just say he was the president. I could discover a cure for cancer, and I will be the black doctor that discovered a cure for cancer. And it's because it has been ingrained in people's DNA to think that way of other people. Nobody has ever asked to come into my home and say, hey, can I have dinner at your house? No, because they don't want to know who I am. My best friend, though, she is from a poor community in in Virginia. If I said West Virginia, she would go crazy. But she is the first white friend, real friend that I can say, ever came to my house and spent the night. Got to know my grandmother, my parents. When I was sick in the hospital with the things that were going on in my head, she came to the hospital and spent the night with me. So I call her my friend because she's been there. She wanted to know me. This is just something that I am, you know? And I'm not ashamed of being black. I'm not ashamed of being a black female. And I'm not even ashamed of the struggles that I've had to go through. But when it comes to race in this country, we have not acknowledged the cruelty that was done and that we have taught our children. And in the South especially, in the North it's understood, but we don't discuss it. But in the South, they are blatant and rude. I've been in places where people didn't even want to go in the bathroom that I've been in, not because I did anything in there, but because they were just like, you're there, and they were literally cringe. They don't want to serve you. They won't acknowledge you in a store. And if they do, it's to follow you. I mean, it's just like insane. It's like, what did I do? And the irony is that my grandfather, my mother's father, for all intents and purposes, was white because he had less than an eighth of black blood in him. And I'm like, you have no idea. And what he went through being married to my grandmother, I can't even imagine. But that alone, it broke something in me. It did. It just made me feel like, what do I do now? No matter what I do, what am I gonna do now?
Sounds like you've dedicated your life to doing something.
Yeah. And that's why for me, people are like, well, why do you want to know about another culture? Why do you want to do that? Because I don't want to put my preconceived notions about somebody else as truth. If I don't understand you because of your religious beliefs, because of your sexual orientation, because of the language you speak, I'm going to find out everything I can about you. Because if I don't, then the day that I have children, or even for my niece and my nephews, I'm going to do a disservice. If I hear something now that I think is wrong, I'm going to say, why would you say that? Do you know them? Do you even understand this?
If you could go back and talk to those girls who were saying to you, what would you say to them?
I mean, I really, in all honesty, I don't even know. Because, I try not to hold resentment in my heart, because if I did, I could be a very bitter person. And I don't want to live my life like that. I've seen very bitter people, angry people. But I would ask them just, what makes you think that you are so special or so entitled to mistreat people or to try to make them feel less than? Because see, the stereotypes that are formed for non-people of color, white people, it's not the same. If I say the word like cracker, they're like, that doesn't mean anything to you. But for me, I know that that is the nickname they gave overseers when they would crack a whip. But it doesn't have any meaning to you, because even that experience you can't understand. You don't get it. So I can't say anything to you that's really gonna hurt your feelings to the core. I could say white supremacy and you'd be like, well, that doesn't pertain to me because I don't believe that. So it doesn't sting you. But you can throw jabs my way. You can paint a picture of me or what you think I look like. There's no way to make you feel that kind of pain. There's nothing I can call your kids that can make you feel so outrageous or make your children feel less than. You can say, oh, well, you're stupid. You're not stupid. Look at your grades. You can't be president. You can, because they've all been except for one. You can't be a doctor. Yeah, you can. It's nothing that I can say to make you feel that kind of that pain. And that's the irony of it. There's nothing that you can't do it. I mean, I could cut you and put salt in it and you still wouldn't really feel it. That's temporary. This leaves lasting marks. And unfortunately, it's been embedded in our DNA and we don't even realize it. I see it in the effects from my grandmother, who's 90 years old, who saw horrific things. My mother, who had to deal with colorism. My father, who had to deal with colorism because he was a darker-skinned man in East Texas. My sisters, sexually, because they are women. And then I experienced it myself because we were women and we happen to be black women. So if I call foul, it's just, well, that just happens. start taken seriously. He would never do that. My brothers have to tell their sons, you can't drive certain places. You need to take the main road, not the back roads, because it's too dangerous if you get stopped in one of these little bitty towns. I don't know if you come home. And they're in college, haven't committed any crime. They're good students. They're just trying to get an education. My dad had to play sports in order to get a scholarship. Not based on it. He's a mathematical genius, but not based on his math merit. Because he played football, he got a full scholarship. My mom, she had to deal with people always just using her for her looks, like, oh, she's pretty, so she doesn't have to think this way. So we all have our things that we have to deal with. But as far as with race, there's nothing I can say that you will ever know that would make you feel that less than. And I refuse to give people that power anymore. And that's why, for me, HBCUs are so important and vital. And I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't realize it until I was on one. Didn't realize how much it can do for your self-esteem to have teachers that look like you, that are teaching you history from a different perspective, that allow you the space to grow and who will get on you when you're not doing what you're supposed to, that force you to really think and to read and to write, not just take a standardized test, that tell you this world will chew you up and spit you out, not because you're not intelligent enough, but just because of the color of your skin. And when they see something that they don't like on campus, they will tell you, you don't do that to each other. They treat you like they're your parents. And at the same time, they're like, I will point out an opportunity for you, but you have to make the decision to do it. My teacher told probably 50 students about Yale last summer to just apply. We only had probably 10 applications, but to tell you the caliber of students that we had, 4 of us got to go to Yale, more than any other HBCU that was invited, and all of them were invited. And when we were there, they did the same thing to us. We'd ask a question. That is so great. I can't believe this. That's an amazing question. We were dealing with a paper conservator, and she kept saying she used bleach with something that she used. There was a student there who was a double major, chemistry and physics, and she kept saying, well, what type? And she's like, we use bleach. And finally, I just said, you do realize she's a chemistry and physics major. And then she's like, oh, and then she broke it down. Like, our brains couldn't absorb it. So it's still a thing. And at that Ivy League school, the only black faces that I saw were cleaning the floors. And when we said hello to them, you would have thought a parade had just entered into the room, because they are not acknowledged. Because they're furniture. You don't talk to the help. So if you're taught that in home, when I'm in a classroom with you, how are you going to truly be able to build a friendship with me, or even want to? If I'm applying for a job, why would you want me around you if you never even had a true friendship? Instead of saying, I have that one black friend, I've got a black friend. Have you ever been to their house? Do you know anything? Have you ever met their siblings? Talk to their parents? Ask them really how their day was? If you have a question about race, have you ever just said, I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't know. Tell me, why do you feel this way? You don't understand Black Lives Matter? You don't understand why you should take a knee? If I tell you it has nothing to do with the Star Spangled Banner, no, it's just saying that I'm taking a knee because I'm holding you accountable to what you say is my inalienable rights as a citizen of this country, and for you not to address that this is an issue that we're dealing with. I don't hate the police. The police fed me growing up. They protect and they serve. But there is a such thing as called overkill. This recent shooting, 20 times, 20 on one person's body. Even if you were going for a kill shot, 20 times. You can hit a knee, you can hit an arm 20 times. And then when we have a kid who's blowing up people around Austin, he was disturbed, he was a bully. No, he was a terrorist. And he targeted people of color at first. And he may have continued to, you don't know. But because we have 4 people of color, specifically that are black, and you don't acknowledge it, you say, we don't look at this as a hate crime. If we consider a mass shooting or murder 3 or more people, I think that qualifies as it. But because he was bullied and misunderstood, and he came from he's well educated from a nice background, he gets to be looked at as a martyr, that he was just a troubled kid. No, he was a terrorist. That was a terrorist act on a free nation. Call it what it was. Don't change the vocabulary just because of the skin color. That's the thing that bothers me so much, because I've gone to other countries and I've been treated like an American, and I come back to American soil and I'm not.
How has leaving your community, going to places not just out of the country but also out of the country, how has that made you understand your community differently?
Well, when I look in this country and I go to brown communities, Latino communities, it's the same thing. We just have a language barrier. And if we could get past that, like we did in the 60s and 70s, we could move forward. But there's a competition for housing, for education, for jobs. It's always this, it's like crabs crawling at each other. We can't move up because one's pulling each other down. Same with Asian communities too. And because those same communities, they've faced discrimination but differently, they know that I have to blame somebody else. So now all of a sudden you have your own image of me because of what you've seen in the newspaper. In Houston alone, you would not think that any person that was white ever committed a crime. Because if there's an accusation, that person's image, that's a brown or Asian or black person, you will see their mugshot on TV. But you can always tell when it is a white crime because they say the suspect and they never show an image. That kind of mentality doesn't work. That's what we see. When I went to Europe, though, when I was introduced to other people, they're like, this is the American. Freaked me out. I was like, what? They're like, the American. Oh, she's American. Not she's Black American or anything like that. It was like, she's American. And they were like, oh. And the only thing they want to know was about my culture. The first thing they would ask me, though, was like, tell me about hip hop, you know? And I'm like, well, that's a big topic. But it was just refreshing that people were just like, I want to know that. But at the same time, I saw discrimination on Afro-Europeans, so those that were from Africa. And it was like, as soon as they heard my American accent, even in a foreign language, they were like, oh, she's American. So that was weird to be in a situation where you have 2 black people in a room, but one's being treated different because we're both from African descent, but their roots are more tied to Africa than mine. And I'd say that's even saying that sounds weird, that their roots are more tied. But I know that there's 54 countries in Africa, and I don't know which one I belong to. I don't know where my ancestors came from. But there's something that's in it that I know is there because there's a pull. When I hear a drum, when I see certain colors, when I see different art, there's something that tugs at me that is familiar. But that I think that everyone should step out of the country at least once in their life. So when I meet younger people, or even some of my friends, I'm like, you have your passport? And they're like, no. I was like, get your passport. I don't care if you just go to Mexico just for like a day. I don't care if you go to Canada, if you don't want to go too far, if you're scared to go on an airplane. But go, just to see the world from a different perspective and to gain a little bit of confidence in yourself. Because it makes a world of a difference when you're looked at as a person and not as your color. And it's a strange thing. I remember coming home and telling my dad, I was like, Dad, the weirdest thing happened. I said, I went to, I was in France and I was walking around and they were introducing me as the American. And he's like, really? He's like, I cannot imagine that. My dad's 64. He's like, I cannot imagine just being there or walking in a room and not being uncomfortable. We're taught at an early age to be uncomfortable in supposedly comfortable situations. You're going to be uncomfortable at school if you're the only minority. You're going to be uncomfortable in your workplace because most of the time, especially when you get into management, you're going to be the only brown face. And then when you have issues about race or topics about race, then all of a sudden it's, oh, no, we don't want to, we don't want to go there, but you've created a problem. Why are we not addressing it? And we see board of directors and you're like, you all saw this and you said that this campaign was okay. I worked for a major bank in management, and they had issued for, I think it was Cinco de Mayo, Mexican bingo cards, right? There is a caricature in the Mexican on the bingo card that is blackface. Whoever printed them just figured, oh, it's not a problem. Until the clients got them and they were like, well, what is this? And then all of a sudden we have to do a recall. And you see, because when I saw it, I was like, are they kidding? Like, did they really think this through? And they were like, oh, it was, if we caused any offense, then why wouldn't you see that and say, that looks a little off. I know it may be culturally there, but we're in the United States and this could be seen as offensive. No thought to it because it doesn't affect them. They don't have any ties. There's no connection to it, and that's the problem. How do you make people be connected to something that they've never experienced or felt? You say empathy, but people will say, well, I don't understand it. I can go to a Confederate cemetery and not feel anything. This is just a war. How can you go to the Vietnam Monument and see all these names of a generation that's gone, pretty much, and not feel anything? But they don't. They don't feel it. And I study history because I know that we are repeating those same cycles. Whether we want to believe it or not, we're going in the same direction. And I feel like in some ways that's my way of activism. Knowledge is my form of activism because it can't be taken away from me. My voice, even if you silence me, I can write. If I can't write, if you take away my fingers, there's some way that I'm going to be able to communicate, whether I tap on my hand or, tap on with my nub of a hand, Morse code, something. You can't take my knowledge away from me.
So interesting, because what I'm hearing is you were placed in a lot of really uncomfortable situations where you had to speak for an entire community. Mm-hmm. When often you grew up in between communities. Yes. And now you've chosen a career where you get to speak as yourself, but as part of the community.
Yeah, and it's weird because when you try to be authentic and transparent, and that's something that I really wasn't taught to be. My parents were like, you be respectful, yes ma'am, no ma'am. And when they would put me in situations where I would meet people that either had wealth or a name for themselves, they would never tell me that because they didn't want me to change my demeanor for that person. So it allows me to be able to go into spaces that most people don't have the opportunity to because I'm allowed to be natural and be myself. But at the same time, it feels almost like being a spy because I have been able to sort of infiltrate into systems that were not built for me and to have opportunities that I'm not supposed to have. And I can tell you more about your culture than you can about mine. So when I speak from a place, sometimes when I talk about things that are going on in the Black community, I'm not always able to say it clearly from the perspective of being a Black person because I've been in the other side for such a long time. So now this process of trying to become more authentic, I'm having to discover my Blackness in a way. And that's a weird thing to say, being in my 30s now. I've had to read literature that I've never read before because they didn't have them in my library to read. I've had to discover activists that I never knew were really activists and how their writing was revolutionary because they discussed topics that at that time were not open for discussion. And so I've always questioned things. I've always been inquisitive, which is weird because my last name being Thomas, in a religious point, it is Thomas the Doubter, who is like, until I put my finger in Jesus' wound, not going to believe it's him. And then he's like, and that's kind of how I've always been. Until I can see it, I can't really believe it or at least learn about it. So whether it's religion, whether it's cultures, whether it's race, gender, I don't know. I remember my cousin came out as a lesbian when I was young. And my dad and my stepmom was like, she can't come to the house. They were very strict in their religion. And somehow or another, one day, she persuaded them to take me out for just a day of fun. And so she took me out and, she asked me some questions because I may have been like in 5th grade. And she took me to her apartment. I was so nervous. I was like shaking to go. I was like, oh my God, I'm like thinking I'm going to see all kinds of crazy things in the apartment. And I go in the apartment, I'm like, it's just furniture, She's like, and she showed me everywhere. She's like, this is my bedroom. It's just queen size bed. Go in the closet. Now there were masculine clothes and more feminine clothes because my cousin, she's more masculine in her apparel and her appearance. But I remember looking, I was like, it looks just like my parents' bedroom. There was nothing different. And all of a sudden, this fear of not understanding or wondering went away. And I just remember laughing. And she's like, what? I was like, I was thinking I was going to see all kinds of crazy stuff in here, Connie. I'm not going to even lie. She's like, this is just the person who I choose to love, but I'm still your cousin. And then all of a sudden opened up a new way of having friends and questioning things, because I'll still ask her questions. I'm like, how does that work? But now it's different. And I'm glad for that experience because I would have been closed off and been like, no, you're just evil and you're going to hell and everything you're doing is weird and corrupt and you're trying to corrupt me. And when I came home, I was like, there was nothing. It's just Connie. I'm good. So I've had those experiences. So now it's just now putting all that together to make sense of what this life is that I have. As short and as extraordinary as sometimes I feel like it can be, there's still so much that I don't even know. I have no clue at all.
I wonder what you think. I mean, it's interesting how you're saying the home is a place where people often remain separate from, right? Isolated from. But is that the path forward? I mean, how do we bridge some of these gaps?
I think, one, we can't take offense when somebody says something that makes us uncomfortable, because that's the problem. When we talk about race, or we talk about religion, or we talk about sexuality, we get uncomfortable because it touches something that's familiar in us. Not necessarily mean you may feel the same way, but we all have some type of spiritual connection. Even if you're atheist, you say, I believe in nothing. There's something that tugs at you that makes you feel a certain way. If you're heterosexual, you know about love. If you have been lost, you know about confusion. You understand that what happens to people when they are when they're transgender, because their body is going through something that their mind is not there. And there have been times in everybody's life where we have been in a situation, even in puberty, just alone, where our mind and our bodies were not connected. If it's a faith situation, if I see a woman who is covered, and I've been fascinated, something I've been researching a lot lately, about women of Islam who cover their hair or cover their bodies completely. Why do they do that? Are they being suppressed? And I found that most of the women that I've seen interviews on, it is not about suppression. It is about a modesty in a way that, if you look at Christian doctrine, is a way that that women of Christianity should be too. You're veiled as a sign of respect for your husband, or as a sign of respect for God, because you're not showing yourself off, because you're supposed to be a bride, and a bride saves herself for a husband. Now, some people don't believe that, and that's okay, but I see it as a very beautiful thing, and I see it as a form of activism in a way too. I have something that I want to keep for myself, and it makes me feel comfortable. It is a way that I feel connected to God, so therefore I should be able to cover my hair, and only the people that are closest to me, meaning my family, should be able to see my hair. In the Jewish faith, they wear a wig when they get married if they're Hasidic. I think that's something that we should respect in others and not degrade them because that's what they want to do, because it makes you uncomfortable that they don't want to wear their hair out. Where it was forced upon women of color here in the United States, especially in Louisiana, because we were seen as competition with our hair if we were mulatto or mestizo, whatever you want to call it, mixed race. So in Louisiana, they were forced to wear a turban. But what did women do, black women do? Put feathers, jewels, everything else, and say, well, if I'm going to be covered up, I'm still going to do it with style. Practice what you preach. Look at your history and know. When it comes to having these conversations, if I sit in front of you and you ask me a question about race, it's okay to see my tears. It's okay to feel my anger, because if you feel it, then maybe something in you may spark. And if you can see that at being 15 years old, that getting that disgusting gift, and I won't even say gift, that disgusting item has an effect on me now, something, 20 years later, then maybe you will see that that action was more than just a tasteless item, but it actually left a scar on my mind and on my heart and on my spirit. And it's my prayer that I can come to peace on it so that I never imprint that same thing on my child whenever I have one. But also be willing to get out of your comfort zone and say that that slum, or what you may believe is a slum, if you go inside of that house, it'll be immaculate. The food that you get will be the best tasting food that you've ever had. The whole house may be the size of this room, but what they have, they open up their heart to you, and you can't be like, can't sit here. I don't want to talk to you about this because we have nothing in common. Cultural nuances is what stops us from being able to say, I feel you, I know you. With the Time's Up, with the women's movement, here it is, we are women, but yet you still are not inclusive, whether you believe it or not. Who are your poster children for the Time's Up movement? What do they look like? What is their social class? How is that fair?
Just because this is a historical interview, that I think a lot of people in the future will enjoy.
Thank
you.
you.
Explain what the Time's Up movement is?
It is a time in which women, most notably those in Hollywood, have discussed sexual harassment, whether it has been through language or physical touch or just a sense of being uncomfortable. And they decided to say, hey, time is up. I am no longer going to be silent. I'm going to use my voice and I'm going to speak out on it. And I want action done, not just you hearing my story. It was based off of a painting that an African-American artist did. And it was a lot of fish in the sea. And she had these little tiny ones that kept saying, time's up, time's up, time's up. And she was addressing sexual harassment and sexual violation of women of color. And an actress by the name of Alyssa Milano saw it and thought it was brilliant. And she tweeted it. And she did the hashtag time up, and it caught on like wildfire. However, because the topic became the Times cover of the year, but the woman who painted the picture was not included in it. But other women were. And I'm like, again, an idea, a concept that was created by people of color, African-American woman, and someone else was given credit and not even brought to the forefront. It is a story that happens time and time again. And with the women's movement, women of color have not been included into it. The suffrage movement, when we're wanting the right to vote, you shouldn't be included in this because they may not allow us to do it because you're black and they don't want the black vote. So you can't sit with us. We don't want you there. Planned Parenthood. African-American women are least likely to get abortions. We don't use that for abortion clinic. We use it for mammograms, pap smears, to get birth control. But yet we're the poster child of having babies and getting abortions, but that's not what it's used for. But it was created so that we could kind of curb the population. When it comes to sexual health and understanding the female body, African-American women's bodies were used as test dummies. There is a monument in New York City in the park where a doctor on women's health has a statue, but yet he would take slaves women, and sometimes without even anesthesia, would operate on them because Black women didn't feel pain. That same thing is still believed, that we don't feel pain, but we're angry because we're passionate, but we're some of the most loyal, determined women ever. If you have a Black woman by your side, I'm telling you, she is going to be there till the wheels falls off, because she's going to support you, she's going to encourage you, and she's going to call you out when you have done something that is not right, because she knows you can do better, because she's had to be placed in situations, not by choice, but by force, to take on roles that she didn't want to be. And it ticked me off so bad whenever Oprah did that speech at the Golden Globes, because everybody's like, she needs to run for president. And I'm like, for once, can a Black woman be the damsel in distress and not be Superwoman? And she doesn't even get to wear a cape. I was like, for once, can we not be the savior of those things? And if we are, give us real credit. Not because you like us, because we give you things for free on our shows, but because you are with us. And that's the conversation that in with women's health and with women's politics that we have not been honest with. It has to be really inclusive, not only just for Black women, but for Latino women, for Asian women. It has to include that, because Asian women were violated, even by our own soldiers in Vietnam. They're fetishized. Latino women, fetishized, exploited as well. They've been suppressed as well, their voice. And if they don't speak the language, it's even worse. African American women, we've been told that we are angry. Yes, we're angry because we are invisible in a world where our skin is so visible, and you call it out, but you won't allow us to be visible and vocal in our feelings and in our emotions. We have been test dummies. Even in Europe, we've been test dummies. Who they called the Hottentotten, the woman from Africa whose body was on display because her rear end was big. She was naked in front of people, and they felt on her. And you said that was okay. That was art. She was part of a freak show because of her natural body. And then when we do say, okay, we love our bodies, then other people get to replicate it and they get credit for it. Cornrows. My mom used to do that for her hair, a protective style, because she didn't have to do her hair every day. We'd braid it back. It's something that was natural. Kim Kardashian wears them in their boxer braids. What the hell? I was like, are you kidding me? Fulani braids. Things I didn't know that were Fulani, but I just knew I liked. In the summer, being a little kid, I remember there's a picture of me and my sisters, and we have our hair. Fulani style is where it's a cornrow and then it's long with a little bead on it. Bo Derek wears it, and all of a sudden she's a 10, you know? And now that style is coming back. And then when we say cultural appropriation, I don't understand what that means. Like, we're all one culture. We all emulate each other. And then when we say that's enough, or touching my hair, people are like, why would you be upset? I don't know where your hands have been. And your intentions for touching my hair is because you want to know, is it greasy? Is it coarse? Is it soft? I remember being in school one time, and I'm sitting there in class just writing, and this girl runs her fingers through my hair, and I jump. And she's like, oh, it's really soft. Who does that? Who wants to do that? I was at a friend's birthday party at a nightclub. It wasn't even a nightclub. It was a bar here in Austin. And this was like probably 4 years ago. And I'm walking, and some man grabs my hair and pulls me back to him to try to kiss me. I don't know who he is. And I have to shove him off because my hair was long and curly at the time. But you don't want to include me in your conversation about sexual violation, about harassment, but yet you can sue somebody if they touch your bottom. Or really, I've been able to sue somebody since I developed anything on my body, if that's the case. Junior high, high school, walking down the street being catcalled. But unfortunately, my grandmother, my mother, my aunts, my sisters, when you are going through puberty and they tell you about the things that happen to your body, unfortunately, there are jerks and there are men who will say things to you, but you know who you are, and don't worry about it. We're not supposed to, supposed to say that's okay. So now, because Susie or Beth, Erica has said, I feel violated. Time is up. I am supposed to be a champion for you. When I've told you this thousands of times, I'm sorry for that, and it's really sad.
Do you have a sense of hopefulness about how we can move forward with some of this stuff?
I do have a sense of hope. I'm an optimist at heart. Doesn't sound like it, but I really am. I see my niece. She's 18 years old. And some parts it's frustrating because she has no concept of the civil rights movement. It's something that happened when TV was in black and white, But I see her friends. They're diverse. When they talk about things, they talk about it in a circle. They spend the night at each other's houses. They say, this is my friend. Not, this is my black friend. This is my Asian friend. One of her friends is practiced Islam, and so she was going through Ramadan, and they were joking about it, like together. She's like, I'm really hungry right now, but I can't because I'm going through Ramadan. My niece was like, well, what is that? And they had a conversation. So when she came home, she was excited to tell us about it. She's like, yeah, Malak said she was hungry because she couldn't eat because it's Ramadan. And I asked her, what is that about? And she was able to explain it to me. It's a back of the mind thought process where, for me, I have to force it with other people my age. So that gives me hope. I feel that with social media, as much as it can cause problems, I think it's a great way to be able to network with people around the world, to be able to share stories that we might not have been able to have before from the perspective of the person that's living it. I don't know a whole lot about what's going on in Syria, like the root of it, but I've seen the images. I've seen the tweets and the messages from people that are living it. And so it allows me to be angry for them and to advocate for change for them. I don't know who the right ruler is supposed to be there, what president is supposed to be there, but I know that what's going on has to stop. And the fact that we don't have more coverage is disheartening to me. I know that my cell phone that I use, I know that there are children in Congo that are digging in these mines for pieces of copper that could actually eradicate all the issues as far as poverty for this country, and they're being exploited by it. I don't have the answer to that at all. But if I can be a voice to say, this is going on, I feel that I'm at least trying. I feel that more people are starting to say, I'm using it, even if it's through social media, because they don't want to actually show their faces in doing it. I think that's a start. If we didn't have hope, what's the point of living? Faith is hope. Faith is believing in things unseen. I can't imagine a future where everything is just cool, ever, all the time. But at the same time, I can imagine a future now. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know if it will be completely inclusive. I don't want people to disappear based on their race or their belief systems. But I want to be able to have a conversation and not be the only one that feels uncomfortable in that room. I want you to feel uncomfortable. Because at least if I know you're uncomfortable, I know that we have something in common. You can at least tell me, I felt uncomfortable in that room, and I can say why. And you say, because this subject matter was brought up and it didn't make me feel good. And I say, well, guess what? I've been there. That feeling that you had, I live it so much that it's natural to me now. That anxiety that you felt, it's natural to me now when I go into a room. And I don't want it to be that way anymore. And I think this type of project, it's not just a story, it's a face. somewhere deep down inside you can relate to it, even if it's to empathize, because you can feel whatever that person is truly saying. Like, you know it's real. It's not made up. It's not for show. It's something that's there. My goal, like the dream that I would ever have, is just for this country to say, we messed up and we're sorry. Don't know how to fix it, but we messed up and we're sorry. Like, sincerely say we're sorry. I think that's why Germany's able to make progress. There's still Nazis that are there. There's still people that think that World War II was a sham. You know, there's still people that don't believe the Holocaust actually happened. But the majority of the people said, we screwed up. We were looking for somebody to pull us out of the depth of destruction after World War I. And we thought we found it in that person. And we knew that some of the things he was saying wasn't right, but the actions, the good things outweighed what we thought were the bad. And we've been paying for it ever since. But we've acknowledged that we've done something wrong. That is the biggest thing ever. That would be the one thing before I take my last breath, whenever that may be. If I could hear that, I'd be like, you know what, God, thank you for that solid, because I've been waiting for it for a long time. It would just make all the difference.
In some ways, it feels like we're further from that effort right now in this moment.
There's two things I remember more than anything else in my life. I remember where I was the moment that President Obama was elected. And I also remember watching the results of this election. And there were two feelings that I had. When I remember sitting there, I was reading to my mom because she had been sick. And I used to read her the Twilight series, which is hilarious. And we were reading it because I was like, I can't watch the TV. I can't watch the results. And my stepdad was in the living room watching it. So we were reading and she was laying down in the bed. And I was sitting on the floor because I refused. She had the TV on. I was like, I refuse to see it. So I'm like laying between her bed and the wall, and I'm reading her this book and not really paying attention. And then all of a sudden, I hear my stepdad walks in the room. He's like, he won. He won. And I remember tears just immediately started falling down my face, like even now, because I thought, this is unbelievable. And I say it now, and I'm like, this is so sad, because in a country that is supposed to be diverse and that is supposed to be the home of the free and the brave, my family has sacrificed for this country. And when I say sacrifice, I've had over 20 family members serve this country that have fought in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Persian Gulf. I have uncles who have suffered the consequences of chemical warfare who are no longer here. One who was a prisoner of war. And the concept of a black president was so shocking and so surreal and so beautiful. He could have quit the next day, but he was that president for that day. And I remember sitting there and I was like, I could honestly tell my children and my nephews, you can be president and it's not a joke. Like, you can do that. And then I remember sitting in my bed watching the results of the election, and I'm looking as all these states are turning red. And I remember being in Europe before then during the primaries, and they said Donald Trump was running for president. I said, you got to be kidding, like, surely. And being in my room and watching the states just turn red. They were just turning red, red, red. States that were normally blue just turning red, red, red. And my sister texted me and she said, are you watching this? And I said, I'm watching it, but I don't believe what I'm seeing. I was like, is this for real? Like, they hate this woman so much. The idea of having a woman president, or they just hate the Clintons so much that you're going with somebody who doesn't have a clue of diplomacy. It's not even his belief systems, it's just diplomacy and his business ethics. And I'm looking at it, and I remember clicking and seeing Rachel Maddow. She goes, "No, you're not dreaming. No, you're not in hell. This is reality." And she like flips her page up. And I went from remembering that I had this elation and this hope with President Obama. It was really hope that we were gonna change, to going from hopelessness at first. It literally felt like a death. And the next week, I just remember walking around and it looked like people were zombies. And seeing the news and seeing like we could actually have a real government like throwover. I mean, the anger that was there was like so surreal. And I just remember sitting there, and I remember Saturday Night Live, Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock were on there, and they did a skit. And they were showing the reactions of other people, and they were like, "You're upset? Wow, the person you wanted to win didn't win." But it was the comedy, but it was so true. It was because the reality was so dark and dismal that it was a joke. It was funny because we were like, what are we going to do next? And for me, what he says, the things that he says, that's one thing. I'm just like, I chalk it up to just his attitude. But international diplomacy is huge for me because I have family that served and who are still enlisted. And if you cannot have a conversation with other countries, you're putting us in danger. And when I say in danger, I mean my freshman year of college, my history professor asked us who were the powerhouses before World War I. Austria-Hungary and Germany and all these, just going through the map. He goes, who was it after World War I? All these people, gone. There's no Austria-Hungary. Germany shrunk. Great Britain now has this. Ottoman Empire, no longer in existence. And he said, if you don't think it can't happen to this country, then you are mistaken. And it was like, all that just came back. And I'm like, you cannot call somebody that is your friend of me in the first place, Rocket Man. You cannot disrespect people that you have built trade on. If you want to change it, there's a way to talk to people. But offending them does not bode well. And you put people in your cabinet who don't know anything either, but only anger. They haven't studied. They haven't learned to have a conversation. They haven't put themselves in someone else's situation. And you have put your country in danger. As much as this country gets on my nerves, it's still my country. I don't know anything else. That's what bothers me. But I see these young people in that high school shooting that happened in Florida. That gives me hope. They're not afraid to use their voice. And some senator said, they can't even vote. Why would I want them to be able to control my gun laws? Well, they can get shot. They should have a voice in being able to say something about gun laws. That is what gives me hope.
What sort of opportunities have you seen in this moment?
I've been allowed in the room, not necessarily the seat at the table, but I'm now allowed in the room. I can raise my hand and I'm acknowledged now, not ignored. And when I say that, that means that people who weren't necessarily open to even being surrounded by people that didn't think like them are now saying, we have a problem. We had an issue a while ago. We got a problem now. And we're at a level that anybody who says anything, I got to at least hear it. And the power of the vote is something that is like a golden ticket to me now. Because now people who have been in offices for a very long time are now feeling uncomfortable. Because you have a group of people now that are younger who are learning about voting. They're not just voting a party because their parents voted. When I was growing up, that's how it was. I remember I was super excited to be able to vote for the first time. And then it kind of waned off. People just waned off from it. But now we have websites that are unbiased that just say, this person, this is what is on their ticket. This is what they believe. You judge who you want. No way or the other. And you have young people that are like, I need to understand what my vote means. Does it really count? What does it say? And they're having these conversations with their parents. And what's ironic is the parents don't even know what it means. Schools are now forced to discuss voting. They now have to really talk about it in a way that matters. It gives me hope because now government was always something nobody wanted to talk about. It was just what your parents did. Those that used to be afraid to speak up in public because, oh, I may not come from the best background, or I may have done something stupid when I was younger. They're like, forget about it. If this man can get in office and do stupid things, I can do it too. There's no longer a fear to shame me. I've often been asked, why don't you go for public office? I don't feel like I could be able to do everything I wanted to do because there are channels and there's always red tape and there's always a moment that you can't fully be, I think, 100 with yourself. You always have to compromise. How much you're willing to compromise, I don't know if I'm able to do it that much on something that I really feel strongly about. But that doesn't mean that it may not be the right decision, you know? But that's what gives me hope because I see a group of people. We talk about it in faith a lot. A generation rising up to spread the gospel. I feel that that's what's happening too. We have a generation that's rising up that says, this is antiquated. We have to do something to change it. So if I can educate, whether it be through this, writing, just having a conversation with somebody that I see sitting there, then that helps. Yeah.
Mr. Porter, do you have any questions?
I don't. I'm just so grateful for what you shared.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to share it. I didn't realize all that was in me.
Beautiful.
At lunch, there's a whole lot more than that.
Yeah. Now it's just figuring out what to do next. Documentaries have been kind of popping in my head a lot more. Shared experiences, social experiences. I saw a documentary on Robert Kennedy once when he was campaigning before his assassination. And he was going into people's homes, but not with news cameras. It was his own personal cameras. And he saw something different. Where before he used to be quite cynical in his brother's office. I don't know if you saw the James Baldwin documentary. Yeah. And I think when you do that, you really get to know people. I can't understand the plight of those that work in the coal industry if I can't be there and talk to them and see their level of poverty. Just like I can't go into a ghetto in the inner city and talk to people who have never been outside of that neighborhood. There are still people that are like that, have never been outside of their neighborhood. They don't see the opportunity that's there because it's been told to them, you're from here, you can't have it. But this country says that you can have whatever you do. But if you don't have bootstraps to pull it up, that's what Texas says. Texas, if you pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But what if you are barefoot? I just think we need empathy. That's what we're lacking. We're lacking empathy.
Is there anything I should have asked that I didn't ask?
I don't know. I feel that you really listened and that you were interested in what I had to say.
You had a lot of interesting things to say.
Thank you. Most people, when you hear people talk, they don't seem interested. They're just, I'm listening, but I'm not hearing you. And I speak that way as being a woman and as being a person of color, being Black, being African American, whatever you want to call it now. We go through phases. We've been Negro, colored. And that's what's important about this. So I hope it continues to play a vital role in the retelling of history, the amnesia of history in this country and in the world. And not just for Black and white relations, but for Black and brown, Black and Asian, and even Black relations between ourselves.